Have you ever burned with the desire to master something, really master it, only to feel like your mind was made of stone? You bought the books, you highlighted the pages, you underlined the quotes that were supposed to change your life, and yet nothing changed. You enrolled in courses everyone swore by. You listened to podcasts from world class experts. You filled notebooks with strategies, frameworks, step by step systems. But when it was time to apply it, silence, confusion, doubt. Maybe you told yourself you just needed a better mentor. So you searched again. You followed a new teacher, signed up for another workshop, paid for another program. You kept thinking, this one will be different. But deep down, a quiet frustration started to grow. Why does everyone else seem to get it while I'm still stuck? If that question has ever haunted you, then what you're about to hear might shift everything you believe about learning, guidance, and growth. Because there's a truth so old, so simple, that most people don't realize it until years have slipped through their fingers. The right teacher doesn't arrive when you're impatient. They don't show up when you're desperate. They don't appear just because you paid the fee or clicked the link. They arrive when you are ready to hear what they've been saying all along. And readiness has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with talent, nothing to do with luck. It has everything to do with humility, with pain, with experience, with the quiet breaking of your ego. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because by the time it's over, you may never look at your past failures or your future mentors the same way again. In a city that never slept, where ambition pulsed through the streets like electricity, where everyone seemed to be sprinting toward money, status, and recognition, there lived a 26-year-old man named Daniel. Daniel was not lazy. He was not careless. He was not unintelligent. In fact, he was obsessed with self-improvement. His apartment shelves were stacked with books on business, psychology, philosophy, productivity. His phone was filled with bookmarked lectures. His weekends were spent at seminars where speakers promised transformation in 12 steps or less. Yet every night, as the city lights flickered outside his window, Daniel felt the same crushing thought settle in his chest. I'm learning, so why am I not growing? He watched classmates surpass him. He saw former colleagues launch startups, build audiences, move forward with clarity. Meanwhile, he felt like he was running on a treadmill, exhausted, sweating, but somehow standing in the exact same place. So he searched harder. He blamed the teachers. Maybe they weren't deep enough. Maybe they were too theoretical. Maybe they didn't understand his situation. What Daniel didn't realize, what most of us don't realize, is that sometimes the lesson doesn't land. Not because it's wrong, but because we're not yet the person who can receive it. And that is where his real journey began. Daniel wasn't just smart. He was relentless. He had the kind of mind that absorbed information quickly, the kind of ambition that kept him awake long after midnight. But more than status, more than money, more than applause, he craved mastery. He didn't just want to start a business. He wanted to understand it, to build something from thin air, to take an invisible idea and turn it into undeniable reality. So he did what every driven 26-year-old does. He devoured knowledge. His bookshelf looked like a shrine to entrepreneurship. The Lean Startup, 0 to 1, Think and Grow Rich, biographies of billionaires, psychology of persuasion, negotiation tactics, branding secrets. Pages were folded. Sentences were highlighted in neon ink. Quotes were copied and rewritten in his own handwriting, as if repetition alone could turn them into power. He didn't just read the words. He studied them, memorized them, repeated them to himself like mantras. But when it was time to build something of his own, everything collapsed. He tried launching a small online store. It failed quietly. He attempted a service business. No traction. He pitched ideas to friends. Polite smiles, no momentum. The strategies that sounded brilliant in books felt strangely lifeless in his hands. So he doubled down. He attended high-energy seminars where charismatic founders paced across the stage, telling stories of risk and triumph. The crowd cheered. Music blasted. "Take action," they shouted. Daniel took action. Still nothing. He purchased premium online programs from industry experts who promised blueprints and guaranteed growth. He filled out worksheets. He followed step-by-step systems. No breakthrough. Finally, convinced he just needed personalized guidance, he hired a business coach. 3 months, weekly calls, structured plans, but every session left him with the same hollow feeling. The advice wasn't wrong, it just didn't fit. It was polished, professional, proven, yet somehow disconnected from his reality. The books gave him principles, but he couldn't bridge the gap between theory and execution. The coach gave him frameworks, but inside those frameworks, he felt strangely absent. His notebook overflowed with other people's insights. Margins packed with quotes, pages filled with bullet points, arrows connecting big ideas. But none of it felt like his own thinking. It was borrowed confidence, borrowed clarity, borrowed direction. And borrowed wisdom has no weight when you're standing alone. Night after night, his girlfriend Sarah would wake up and see the light still on in the living room. Daniel would be sitting there, surrounded by towers of books, laptop open, multiple tabs playing business lectures at double speed. From a distance, he looked dedicated. Up close, he looked exhausted. Not the exhaustion of hard work, but the exhaustion of chasing something that refuses to be caught. Sarah once asked gently, "Do you even enjoy this anymore?" Daniel didn't answer. Because the truth scared him. He wasn't sure if he was learning or just hiding behind learning. And deep inside, beneath all the ambition and effort, a quiet fear began to whisper, what if the problem isn't the teachers? What if the problem is me? Daniel, Sarah would whisper softly, watching him drown in another late-night spiral of notes and strategies. Maybe you're pushing too hard. Maybe you need to pause. Breathe. But Daniel would shake his head almost immediately. No, I just haven't found the right mentor yet. I need someone sharper, someone who's been where I'm trying to go, someone who can actually show me the path. He truly believed that somewhere out there was a voice powerful enough to unlock everything. What he couldn't see, what he wasn't ready to admit, was this. He wasn't searching for wisdom. He was searching for certainty. He wanted someone to hand him answers wrapped in clarity and confidence. But answers are heavy. And if you're not strong enough to carry them, they slip right through your hands. 2 years passed in a blur of podcasts, paperbacks, webinars, and highlighted paragraphs. Daniel convinced himself he had absorbed enough. He felt armed with knowledge. This was it. It was time. He launched an online store selling handmade lifestyle products. He built the website himself. He crafted brand messaging based on everything he had studied. He optimized product descriptions. He ran ads exactly the way the courses instructed. He followed the formulas, every single one. 18-hour days became normal. Coffee replaced sleep. His phone never left his hand. He obsessed over metrics, conversions, click-through rates. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Then reality hit. 6 months in, the cracks were impossible to ignore. Sales were unpredictable. A few orders one week, silence the next. Suppliers missed deadlines. Shipping delays triggered refund requests. Ad campaigns burned through cash without meaningful returns. Strategies that had worked brilliantly for others fell flat in his hands. The savings he had built over years? Gone. The credit card balance? Rising quietly, mercilessly. And one cold November evening, the truth sat across from him like an unwelcome guest. Daniel was alone in his small apartment. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside, the air felt heavy. His laptop screen illuminated the room with a pale blue glow. Analytics dashboard, 12 visitors today, 0 sales. He stared at the numbers as if they might rearrange themselves out of pity. He had done everything right, every tactic, every checklist, every principle. And still, he failed. Something inside him cracked. For the first time, ambition didn't rise to fight the disappointment. Anger did. He stood up abruptly, grabbed one of the best-selling business books that once filled him with fire, the one with underlined pages and folded corners, and hurled it across the room. It slammed into the wall and dropped to the floor, pages bent, spine twisted. "What's wrong with me?" he shouted into the empty space. His voice echoed back at him, smaller than he expected. "I studied. I listened. I followed the system. Why doesn't it work for me?" The room offered no answer, only silence. Later that night, Sarah found him sitting on the floor, back against the couch, head buried in his hands. The books that once felt sacred were scattered around him like broken idols. The highlighters, the notebooks, the plans. All of it looked meaningless now. He didn't look like an entrepreneur anymore. He looked like a man who had just realized that information is not transformation. And for the first time in years, Daniel wasn't searching for another teacher. He was staring directly at his own reflection, and he didn't recognize the person looking back. "I'm just not smart enough," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm not cut out for this. Maybe this was never meant for me. The words tasted bitter. Final. Sarah sat down beside him on the cold floor, close enough to touch him, but not close enough to fix what was breaking inside. She didn't offer a motivational quote, didn't argue, didn't try to patch his pride, because she could see something he couldn't. Daniel wasn't failing because he lacked intelligence. He was failing because he was running from himself. He kept searching for the missing key in other people's hands when the locked door was inside his own chest. The next morning, with swollen eyes and a strange calm in his veins, Daniel made a decision that felt like defeat, but was actually the first honest choice he'd made in years. He shut the business down. He refunded what he could, sold off the remaining inventory at a loss, canceled subscriptions, closed accounts. He faced the numbers, he faced the debt, and then more quietly, he faced the truth. He stopped searching. No more late-night course purchases. No more limited-time masterclasses. No more new books promising 7 steps to certainty. He didn't stop because he had clarity. He stopped because he was exhausted, too tired to chase, too bruised to pretend, too empty to keep performing ambition. And in that surrender, that raw, unpolished surrender, something subtle shifted. 3 weeks later, Daniel was wearing a black apron instead of a blazer. He got a job at a small neighborhood coffee shop to start paying off what he owed. It wasn't impressive. No one applauded. No one reposted it on LinkedIn, but it was honest. For the first time in years, he wasn't optimizing anything. He wasn't analyzing markets. He wasn't tracking metrics. He wasn't comparing himself to former classmates. He was just present, grinding beans, steaming milk, wiping tables, listening to the hum of conversation. And strangely, the noise in his head began to quiet down. One slow Tuesday afternoon, when rain tapped softly against the windows, an older man walked in. Early 60s, maybe older. Simple jacket, calm posture. In his hand, a weathered leather notebook, the kind that had been opened 1,000 times. He ordered a black coffee. No sugar, no milk. He chose the table by the window. Daniel prepared the drink carefully, not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because there was nothing else demanding his attention. He noticed the temperature, the aroma, the timing. When he placed the cup on the table, the man looked up and smiled gently. "Thank you," he said. "You made this with care, I can tell." Daniel blinked, slightly embarrassed. "It's just coffee." The man's eyes sharpened, not critically, but knowingly. "No," he replied softly. "Nothing is just anything when you give it your full attention." The sentence wasn't dramatic. It wasn't wrapped in business jargon. But it landed. Daniel stood there for a second longer than necessary. Something about the way the man spoke, steady, unhurried, completely grounded, felt different from the voices he was used to hearing. There was no performance in it, no urgency, no sales pitch, just presence. Over the next few weeks, the man returned. Same time, same table, same black coffee. And gradually, without forcing it, conversations began to unfold. His name was Robert. He had built 3 companies from the ground up, sold them, retired 5 years ago. But he never led with that. He never offered advice up front. He never once said should do. Instead, he asked Daniel questions. Simple ones. What did you enjoy about your business? What frustrated you most? When did you feel most alive? What were you afraid of losing? No frameworks, no formulas, no 10-step systems, just questions. And for the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't scrambling to collect answers. He was sitting still long enough to hear his own. "Why did you really want to start a business?" Robert asked one afternoon, his voice calm, almost casual. Daniel didn't hesitate. "To be successful, to make money, to have freedom." Robert nodded slowly, but he didn't respond. He just held Daniel's gaze, steady, patient, almost unsettling in its silence. Daniel shifted in his seat. The air suddenly felt heavier. Those answers had always sounded powerful in his head, ambitious, driven. But under Robert's quiet stare, they felt rehearsed, surface level. So Daniel swallowed and tried again. "I guess," he paused, searching for something more honest. "I wanted to prove I was smart, that I wasn't average, that I could build something meaningful, something that mattered." Robert's expression softened. "Ah," he said gently, "so it was never really about the business." Daniel frowned. "It was about you." The words didn't attack him. They revealed him. The next day, Robert arrived carrying 2 small potted plants. He placed them on the table between them. Look, he said. One plant was vibrant, leaves full, green, reaching confidently toward the light. The other looked tired. Its leaves were pale, slightly curled. It leaned awkwardly to one side. What's the difference? Robert asked. Daniel studied them. The healthy one probably has better soil, more water, more sunlight. Robert smiled faintly. Look closer. Daniel bent forward. The pots were transparent. In the thriving plant, thick roots stretched deep and wide, gripping the soil firmly. In the struggling one, the roots were thin and shallow, circling near the surface, tangled and cramped. The second plant, Robert said quietly, is trying to grow upward before it has grown downward. Daniel stayed silent. It wants height before stability. It wants to be seen before it's secured. So even if you give it water, even if you give it sunlight, it cannot sustain itself. Robert's eyes met his. You were like this plant. The words didn't sting. They settled. You were trying to build a business before building the person capable of carrying one. You studied strategies before understanding your fears. You memorized frameworks before strengthening your foundation. He leaned back slightly. You were looking for teachers to give you height, when what you needed were roots. Something shifted inside Daniel. Not a dramatic collapse, not a painful realization. More like ice thawing after a long winter. For the first time, he saw it clearly. He hadn't been chasing success. He had been running from insecurity. Every late-night course, every highlighted quote, every desperate search for the right mentor. It wasn't hunger for mastery. It was fear of being ordinary. Robert continued, his voice steady. Every author you read had real wisdom. Every seminar had value. The strategies weren't wrong. The courses weren't useless. He paused. But you weren't ready to receive them. Daniel looked down at his hands. You can pour water onto rock all day, Robert said softly, but it won't grow anything. Not because the water is bad, but because the ground is unprepared. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the coffee machine behind the counter. For 2 years, Robert went on, you tried to collect answers without first asking the right questions. You wanted results without self-understanding. You wanted certainty without character. Daniel exhaled slowly. So what do I do now? He asked. Robert smiled, not triumphantly, not mysteriously, simply, grow downward. No 12-step plan, no business blueprint, no grand strategy. Understand your fears, build discipline when no one is watching, do small things with excellence, learn to sit with discomfort, learn who you are without applause. He tapped the healthy plant gently. When the roots are strong enough, growth is no longer forced. It becomes natural. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel behind. He didn't feel desperate. He didn't feel the need to sign up for anything. He just felt grounded. And in that grounding, he began to understand the ancient truth he had missed all along. The teacher doesn't appear when you are hungry for success. The teacher appears when you are finally humble enough to grow. You weren't learning to grow, Robert said quietly. You were learning to hide. Daniel looked up. You consumed knowledge the way some people consume distractions, not to confront yourself, but to avoid yourself. The words were calm, precise. You wanted someone to hand you a formula, Robert continued. Step 1, step 2, step 3, guaranteed success. Daniel nodded slowly. That's exactly what he had been searching for. But mastery, Robert said, is not mechanical. It isn't built from copying steps. It's built from understanding principles. He tapped the table gently. And you cannot understand principles when you are running from your own reflection. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, but weighty. Robert leaned back in his chair. The student who is truly ready, he said, doesn't obsess over finding the perfect teacher. He paused. The ready student becomes capable of learning from anything. From failure, from boredom, from repetition, from making coffee. The teacher doesn't suddenly appear from the outside, Robert continued. The teacher was always present, in your mistakes, in your frustration, in your collapse. His eyes softened. You just couldn't see the lesson yet. Daniel swallowed. Do you know why I'm speaking to you like this now? Robert asked. Daniel shook his head. Because for the first time since I met you, you're not performing. That word hit harder than any criticism. You're not trying to impress me with the books you've read. You're not quoting billionaires. You're not asking me for shortcuts. You're not trying to sound ambitious. Robert smiled faintly. You're simply here, present, honest, unprotected. You're finally comfortable saying, I don't know. He let that settle. That's readiness, not confidence, not knowledge, not talent. He leaned forward slightly. Readiness is humility. Readiness is presence. Readiness is openness. When you stopped chasing teachers, you became someone who could learn. The words didn't create fireworks inside Daniel. They created space. After that conversation, nothing dramatic happened. There was no lightning strike of enlightenment, no sudden business idea, no viral success story. But something subtle shifted, like eyes slowly adjusting after stepping out of a dark room. Daniel stopped treating the coffee shop as a punishment. He stopped seeing it as a temporary embarrassment he needed to escape from. Instead, he started observing. He noticed which customers came back and why. He paid attention to how small details changed someone's mood. He watched how the shop owner handled complaints calmly, without ego. He studied consistency, patience, margins, waste. Not because he was building another plan, but because he was finally curious. Not about success, but about reality. He focused on making each cup better than the last. He showed up on time. He kept promises. He managed his debt slowly, steadily. No applause, no announcements, no grand comeback. Just roots growing quietly beneath the surface. And for the first time in his life, Daniel didn't feel behind. He felt grounded. He wasn't asking, when will I succeed? He was asking, who am I becoming? And that question changed everything. Instead of chasing the next breakthrough, Daniel began doing something far more powerful. He started paying attention. He noticed how some customers burst through the door with phones pressed to their ears, shoulders tight, eyes restless, ordering without looking up. Others entered slowly, as if the cafe were a sanctuary. They inhaled the aroma, chose their seat carefully, wrapped their hands around the cup like it was a ritual. He observed the rhythm of the place. How Maria, the morning barista, greeted regulars by name, and how their faces softened instantly. How a simple, "How's your daughter doing?" made someone stay 10 minutes longer. How eye contact created warmth that no marketing campaign could manufacture. He paid attention to the tiny gears that kept everything running smoothly. The timing of preparation, the way the team communicated during rush hour, the quiet efficiency behind the counter. But this time, he wasn't hunting for business hacks. He wasn't trying to squeeze every moment into a strategy. He was simply noticing. And for the first time, learning felt alive. Robert still came in 3 times a week. Same black coffee, same seat by the window. But the energy between them had shifted. Daniel no longer leaned forward with urgency asking, "So how do I win?" Instead, he would say things like, "I realized something today. When Maria greets people by name, they don't just buy coffee, they feel seen. And when they feel seen, they stay." Robert would smile slightly. "Yes," he'd say. "Now you're not learning from me." He tapped the table lightly. "You're learning from reality." The difference was subtle, but profound. Robert began giving Daniel small practices, not tactics, not business blueprints, disciplines. For 1 week, he said once, before you respond to anyone, pause for 3 seconds. Just 3. Notice what changes. Another time, for 30 days, write down one thing you failed at each day and what it revealed about you. And another, every morning, ask yourself, what am I avoiding today? None of these sounded impressive. They weren't the kind of advice you could package into a viral headline. They didn't promise explosive growth or financial freedom in 90 days. In fact, months earlier, Daniel might have dismissed them as too simple. But now, he followed them. The 3-second pause made him aware of his defensiveness. The daily failure journal exposed patterns of impatience and pride. The morning question forced him to confront uncomfortable tasks instead of postponing them. Slowly, almost invisibly, something solid began forming inside him. Discipline, clarity, emotional steadiness, roots. 6 months passed. Daniel was still wearing the same apron, still steaming milk, still wiping tables at closing time. But he wasn't the same man who had thrown a book across the room. He was calmer, more attentive, less hungry for validation. He no longer felt the urge to announce future plans or prove he was on his way. He was just building, quietly. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the window and dust floated in the golden air, Daniel sat across from Robert and said softly, "I think I understand now." There was no excitement in his voice, only certainty. Daniel looked at Robert, his voice steady but softer than it had ever been. "All those books I read before, they were saying the same things you're teaching me now." He let out a slow breath. but I couldn't hear them. I wasn't searching for truth. I was searching for a formula, something to follow, something to copy. Robert's eyes warmed. And now? He asked. Now, Daniel said, I don't want to learn so I can succeed. I want to learn so I can grow. There it was. Not ambition, not desperation, not ego, growth. Robert nodded slowly. Then you're ready. The words weren't dramatic. They didn't echo like a prophecy, but they carried weight. I'll be leaving the city next month, Robert continued, retiring to the coast, quieter air, slower mornings. Daniel felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. But before I go, Robert said, reaching into his bag, I want to give you something. He placed the worn leather notebook on the table between them, the same one Daniel had seen him carry every single visit. Daniel stared at it as if it were sacred. These are my notes from 40 years in business, Robert said calmly. Lessons I learned the hard way, principles I discovered, mistakes that cost me money, mistakes that cost me pride. Daniel picked it up carefully. The edges were softened with age, pages slightly bent, ink faded in places. Why me? He asked quietly. Robert held his gaze. Because now you're ready to receive it. He smiled faintly. 6 months ago, you would have opened this book looking for shortcuts. You would have searched for the fastest path, the hidden trick. He tapped the notebook gently. Now you'll read it looking for understanding. A pause. The book hasn't changed, Daniel. His eyes sharpened just slightly. You have. 2 years later, Daniel started another business, but this time, it felt different from the very beginning. He didn't rush to announce it. He didn't obsess over being impressive. He didn't copy someone else's blueprint. He built slowly. He chose a problem he genuinely understood. He listened more than he spoke. He tested ideas without attaching his identity to the outcome. And when challenges came, because they always do, he didn't spiral. He didn't panic and immediately look for another guru. He didn't assume he was broken. He paused. He observed. He adjusted. Sometimes the solution came from a lesson in Robert's notebook. Sometimes it came from a mistake he had made years earlier. Sometimes it came from simply sitting still long enough to see clearly. The business didn't explode overnight. It grew, steadily, sustainably, quietly. Revenue climbed without chaos. Customers returned not because of aggressive tactics, but because of genuine value. The team he eventually built respected him. Not for flashy leadership, but for calm presence. This time, the foundation was different. He had grown roots before reaching for height, and that changed everything. Eventually, people began approaching Daniel the same way he once approached others. How did you do it? What's your strategy? What's the secret? Daniel would smile, not mysteriously, not arrogantly, just knowingly, because he understood something now that he couldn't have understood before. The secret isn't a system, it's the person using it. And the teacher you're searching for? They've been speaking to you all along, through failure, through frustration, through ordinary moments you once thought were just coffee. The only question is this: are you ready to listen? How did you build this? Who was your mentor? What program did you follow? Whenever people asked, Daniel would smile, and in his mind, he would see an older man by a cafe window, a black coffee, a worn leather notebook. I had a great teacher, he would say, but I only met him when I stopped hunting for one. Maybe that's where you are right now. Scrolling, researching, comparing mentors, waiting for the one book, the one course, the one voice that will finally unlock the door. You're telling yourself, when I find the right guidance, everything will change. But here's what Daniel discovered, and what might change everything for you. The teacher doesn't show up when you're desperate. The teacher shows up when you're ready. And readiness has nothing to do with how many books you've read. It has everything to do with how honest you're willing to be. It's not about accumulating more information. It's about developing humility, presence, self-awareness. Let me make this simple. First, every mentor you've encountered already had something valuable to offer. If the lesson didn't land, it doesn't mean they failed you. It means you weren't ready to receive it yet. And that's not shameful. That's human. Second, readiness begins the moment you stop performing. When you stop trying to sound intelligent, stop chasing the next secret. Stop pretending you're further along than you are. Readiness is when you can sit quietly and say, I don't know, but I'm willing to see. Third, when you're truly ready, teachers are everywhere. In the job you think is beneath you, in the mistake you're trying to hide, in the book you already read but didn't understand at the time, in the uncomfortable feedback you've been avoiding. The wisdom was never absent. Your ego was just too loud to hear it. So if you're searching for guidance right now, try something radical. For 1 week, stop consuming. No new books, no new courses, no new podcasts promising breakthroughs. Instead, sit with what you already know and write this question down. What am I avoiding by constantly seeking more information? Be ruthless with your honesty. Are you avoiding failure, responsibility, action? The possibility that you might have to change, not your strategy, but yourself? That answer is your doorway. Because here's the truth most people discover too late. You don't need the perfect teacher. You need to become the right student. And the right student isn't the smartest person in the room. It's the one who is humble enough to listen, present enough to notice, open enough to admit they are unfinished. If this story found you at the right moment, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's still searching outside for what can only be built within. Because sometimes one message heard at the right time can shift the entire direction of a life. Until next time, remember this. Stop chasing voices. Start strengthening your roots. The teacher will appear when you're ready. And if you've made it this far, you're closer to ready than you think.